Welcome to this week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast, where experienced professionals, entrepreneurs, and community leaders based in Kingston upon Thames are invited on to share their story with us. I'm your host, Amir Rochalina.
This week's episode of the Inside Kingston podcast is brought to you by Holland, Harnham Wills, a financial planning and wealth management firm based in Kingston upon Thames. Holland, Harnham Wills specialises in retirement planning for senior professionals and successful business owners. Visit hhw-uk.com to start feeling more relaxed and confident about your financial future.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. I'm joined today by Clare Mannall. Clare is the founder of CEM Bookkeeping and Consultancy Services, a firm that provides professional bookkeeping services to small businesses, not-for-profit organisations, sole traders, and individuals. What's unique about Clare is how she leverages her experience in managing the accounts departments for a variety of businesses, as well as her experience of teaching finance to degree-level students, to create a service that really aims to paint the picture and demystify the numbers for her clients. And be sure to listen to the end, where Clare discusses the importance of encouraging female entrepreneurship and shares some valuable tips for our young listeners who plan on setting up their own businesses. So whether you're interested in knowing more about bookkeeping or would like to know more about what it takes to run a successful independent business, then I hope you enjoy this episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Welcome, Clare Mannall, to the Inside Kingston podcast. Clare, I'm really excited about this conversation because as a partner in a small business, I know only too well the importance of understanding one's own business numbers, and I'm sure our listeners can learn a lot from your experience on this front too. But to kick off this conversation, I'd like to go back in time, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So, where did you grow up?
I actually grew up in Surbiton. My parents are both from this area, and my dad had been working away, and we moved back when I was about 3. And bar university, I've pretty much lived here ever since.
Oh, fantastic. And where did you go to university and what did you study?
I went to the University of Huddersfield, and which was originally a polytechnic, and then in my first term there, it became a university.
All right.
And
okay.
I studied hospitality management, although in those days it was called hotel catering and institutional management, which wasn't quite so glamorous, but hospitality management.
So this would have already given you an insight into sort of the numerical side of managing and running a business. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It was mainly a business studies course, but with lots of application to hotels and restaurants, which I absolutely loved frequenting. Not that we did a lot when I was younger, but I loved the buzz when you walked in a hotel, and that was kind of what made me go into studying what I did study. And I wasn't particularly good at maths at school. I don't think any of my teachers at KGS would have rated me on my maths skills. But bizarrely, I loved the finance module when I was at university, and that was what I excelled in. And in group work, that's what everyone wanted to work with me on. But I loved the way it all made sense and everything balanced, and you kind of knew if you were right or wrong. So it was all logical.
It's funny how sometimes it's just at a different stage of life, you look at the same thing you looked at when you were younger, and it just makes more sense for some reason, isn't it?
Absolutely. And it is just the fundamentals of maths. You just need to be able to add, subtract, multiply, divide, and do some fractions and percentages.
Absolutely.
I didn't have all that trigonometry bit that I wasn't very good at.
Yeah, very good. So Clare, could you tell us a little bit about your career journey before setting up your business?
Yeah. So when I left university, I went off to a hotel in Hertfordshire for a year, and I worked there as night auditor and duty manager. So I was basically about 23 by that point, and that was quite a big role, really. And I don't think I knew what had hit me, because if anything happens in a hotel that's a little bit quirky, you can guarantee it happens at night. So in amongst that, I was also trying to do all my audit work, but it was a huge learning curve about everything that happens in finance. And in those days, early 90s, computer systems were still quite basic. And there was a lot of integrating of IT elements overnight. And if things went a bit wrong, you'd still be there at about 9 a.m, desperate for your bed. But it was a brilliant learning curve. And from there, I then went on to work at Planet Hollywood as a income auditor. So I used to check all the cash outs every day that the managers had done, and then I'd make sure the money actually made its way into the bank account. And then at key times in the month, I'd do lots of other different roles within the accounts team. And I was there about 2 years. And from there, I went on to work for Belgo's, which is a Belgian restaurant with mussels and fries. Some of you may have heard of it. Mm-hmm. And again, a similar role, but I also did quite a lot around stock take and working with the chefs to support their food costs and help the restaurant to run efficiently and profitably. And then from there, I went to work for the Royal Opera House in a very similar role, but I was leading the finance team for the contract caterer at the Royal Opera House. But all of this time, I was a little bit frustrated because I hated exams and I really didn't want to go down a route of doing my accountancy exams. And the bit I really loved in all of these jobs was talking to the managers that were on the floor and just helping them to understand their numbers better. And from there, I started to realise that I probably wasn't going to stay in finance departments. And I started to reach out to find out how I could get into teaching. And I ended up finding myself at the right place at the right time. And I moved across to Westminster Kingsway College, where I taught finance to hospitality and tourism students for about 13 years. Wow. And along the way, I managed all the higher education. We had about 400 students and about 10 members of staff. And I put a bit more fun back into the study process. So we did quite a lot of delivery and quality of delivery. And then we also did loads of field trips around Europe with the students, which were a huge amount of fun. And we put a little bit of study into it. So, and I guess from there, I'd got to that place where I'd achieved everything I wanted to achieve at the college, and I'd got outstandings for my department and the higher education quality place. We were very pleased with the way we did things and what we did. And the role wasn't really growing or going any further. So I could just see myself starting to sit back and get a little bit bored, which is not a good combination for me. And I started to think about plan B. And really, I would always say it would have been plan Z originally. Couldn't imagine ever finding a time in my life when I would actually think about doing plan B. But this was the time. And in the end, I left. And that's when I set up my bookkeeping practice. But
that's really interesting.
I had to wade through some bookkeeping exams. So I spent 6 months doing all my exams through the Institute of Certified Bookkeepers. And in the process, starting to look at websites, email addresses, logos, all those bits that actually I would say I'm not very good at. I'm not really a marketeer. And marketing and finance don't always blend very well together either. So I had to learn quite a lot of new skills to set up the business. And then from there, when I'd passed all my exams, I had my practice license, and it was a case of what do I do next? So I started doing a bit of hourly paid teaching at university in West London. And gradually over the next couple of years, each semester, I would reduce my teaching and find that I increased another client. It was one of those classics, speculate to accumulate. I would think, I think I've got another client in the pipeline. Can I afford to drop one of those classes? And that's what I did. So over those 2 years, I gradually reduced the teaching and increased my work within my practice until I was full time. So that's really my journey to where I'm at now, almost now.
That's really interesting, Claire. And there's quite a bit in that I want to sort of unpeel for our listeners throughout this conversation. But firstly, let me ask you this. So bringing this conversation into the present, tell us a little bit about your business today.
Okay, so CEM has been going for 5 years, and it started off with being me, but now we have 3 lovely ladies that work part-time, 2 bookkeepers and 1 admin lady. And they help keep me on the straight and narrow so that I can go out and look for more clients along the way. I think I would say we have about 40 clients, which is mainly small businesses that need support to do their accounts. Anything from 1 day a week, so those are some of my bigger clients, through to some clients that just need half a day a month, or even half a day a quarter to do a VAT return. And I think one of the things that stands us out as a bookkeeping business is that every month we produce a set of management accounts for our clients, so they can see exactly how they're doing on their profitability. And we also have a sheet on the spreadsheet, because we love spreadsheets at CEM. We have a sheet that tells our clients roughly what their HMRC liabilities are at any point in time, because that seems to be one of the biggest fears for our clients, making sure they're in line with HMRC. And we also have a sheet that shows the variance from 1 year to the next. So what's going on? And they can compare from 1 year to the next. So I suppose the ethos of CEM is to really take the pain out of bookkeeping and accounts. Whenever I talk to a client, you find that they've got really burdened with doing the numbers and really worried that they don't understand it and aren't doing it the right way and don't really understand it. And they want someone to come along and come take that pressure off them and make sure that they're in line with what HMRC wants from them and doing it all the right way. And we generally find that they have been doing it right, but they've probably taken 2, 3, 4 times longer than we do to do it. So we give them that space to go back to doing what they're really good at, and we carry on doing what we're really good at. So that's our main ethos here, to take the pain out, give people lots of tips and advice. We really like to automate anything we can, because there's nothing more boring than ploughing through 100 invoices and manually inputting them. So we have some really great softwares that do a lot of that for us. And then I guess our third big element to what we do is trying to give back to society in general. So I'm not just a business that takes business from my clients and runs with it, but I want to actually give back a few things as well. So otherwise it can be very one-sided running a business.
We'll definitely talk about that a bit later in the conversation, Claire, because I want you to expand on that, if that's okay. And full disclosure to our listeners, we are clients of your business, and I think the interesting thing that you bring to the mix here is the energy when we're looking at, frankly, numbers. And we try to do that to our clients on the personal finance side, and that's the feedback we receive. And it's great to find sort of a kindred spirit on what in you when you look at our business numbers as well. So from that point of view, I think just that energy itself changes the dynamic on how we look at our business numbers. You mentioned something there. No, not at all. You mentioned something there, Claire, which is also a motto that I see you use on your website, which is this phrase: if you're repeating it, automate it. Could you expand on that a bit for the benefit of our listeners, and perhaps talk about a little bit about the role of technology in your role today?
Absolutely. I think I don't think I'd really appreciated it until I went to a quite geeky conference called ZeroCon about 18 months ago, and it's a conference about all things Xero, which is an accounting software that some of your listeners may have heard of and some may not. But they put on a big 2-day event every year. And it isn't just all about Xero. They have some really amazing speakers that come in and talk really outside of the box, which is inspiring. And when I went 18 months ago, there was a chap there from, I think he was from Switzerland, actually. And he was all about automation. And that was really his motto. He basically said, if you're repeating it, automate it. There's enough software out there that you shouldn't be repeating a task over and over again, because it's not an effective use of your time. And I really liked that. And I've gone away and I've used it a lot with clients, because you find them doing things over and over again. And there's such amazing software out there. And the key thing is it's not perfect software. So one of the things that he talked about was, is the role of the bookkeeper and accountant disappearing in an age of computers? But it isn't, because computers aren't perfect. They're only as good as their programmers. And so one of the things we do is we automate a lot of the importing of purchases, invoices, receipts. We give our clients an app that they download on their phone. And then if they go to a coffee shop and get coffees for them and someone else they're doing some work with, they can take a picture of the receipt, and then it feeds through, and we can see it coming through into the software, and then we audit it. We just check that the computer has read the correct information. And from there, we import it into the accounting software. And from there, it then reconciles with the bank account. So it downloads the accounting software, downloads your bank feed from your bank automatically. And you end up with this just brilliant tool that takes the pain out of the repetitive tasks. And that then gives us more time to commit to the more interesting bits of accounting and bookkeeping, which is being able to go out and meet the clients and go through their accounts with them and talk about the things they want to be doing in the future and helping them to project for that. And one of the things that CEM is launching this year, post self-assessment tax season, is a cash flow software. And that actually links with Xero and reads what's going on in your bank account and makes predictions for the next 12 months. And you can then go in and amend those predictions, but it sort of looks at the way your sales patterns work. It looks at how your customers pay you and the frequency by which they pay you and how delayed that is. And it looks at the way you pay bills as well. And it gives you a beautiful picture chart, which I find most clients love a good picture because that explains numbers perfectly. And they can see if it's going up or down, the cash flow. And then from there, they can see if it's sort of hitting their targets. So one of the things we're hoping to do this year is work with our clients to make sure that's a really accurate tool for them to go in and look at, and then review it with them as well. And then if they are thinking about taking on another member of staff or buying a piece of equipment or wanting to move office, we can put in all those sort of bits of information into the cash flow. And then it shows you what will happen to your cash flow over that period of time.
Oh, that sounds really exciting, Claire.
Yeah. So I guess that's where I'm at, really. That's the bit I love. It's getting out and talking to the clients and talking to them about their accounts and giving them extra tools along the way.
And it seems to me that is very much in line with what probably the small business owners you're dealing with want to have in their life as well, which is the numbers managed in a way that's properly kept so that their business can stay afloat, so that they can go out and actually do the fun bits that they enjoy doing in their business, be that whatever field they work in.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. It's all about, doing the bits you enjoy, because those are the bits you end up being really good at. And those Absolutely. Are the bits that enable you to expand your business.
Claire, what would be some of your top bookkeeping tips for our listeners to run an efficient bookkeeping system if they're doing it themselves?
Right. Well, my first one is when I talk to freelancers that are perhaps just starting out. They're not really a business, they're just starting out. My first top tip is set up a separate bank account for your business transactions. It doesn't need to be a business account, it just needs to be a second current account in your name. Because if you let all your income and expenditure float in amongst your normal day-to-day living, you have absolutely no idea how your business is doing. But the simplest tool is if you've got a bank account and you've got the money coming in from your customers and you've got the money going out for your bills, you can very quickly see what's left without needing big expensive software. So that would be my first kind of top tip. If you're starting out, just set up a separate bank account. Plus, it looks a bit more professional as well.
That's a great tip.
Yeah, and then when you become a limited company, obviously you go down a slightly different route. If you're already a small business, my next top tip would be invest in some good software. There's lots of different cloud-based softwares out there, and they're all really great, and they all offer different things. But often, as business people, we make a decision purely based on price, and price doesn't always equal quality. So, do your homework, and even if something seems like a bit more expensive, just check it's going to be worth it. And I would definitely look at a cloud-based solution, because why would anyone go back to being desktop, really? Alongside that, I'd look at automation software, so like things where you can import receipts. I can't bear paper, which people think is extraordinary for someone who is a bookkeeper or accountant, but I hate paperwork and paper on my desk, and there's lots of it right now. But at the end of the day, it gets cleared away. But clients come quite often with folders of paper. I don't have many carrier bags of receipts, which is quite a tale for a lot of bookkeepers. But I love just getting rid of it, getting it back to the client. But actually, if you use some automation software, you never have to worry about paperwork again, because you've got evidence of every transaction sitting linked with your bank account and your transactions. So, yeah. And I guess one of my other tips would be in terms of when you're choosing a bank these days, there's so many new banks out there, and they're actually offering some really great services. So don't always look just at the traditional when you're setting up a bank account. And I guess my last top tip, which sounds like I'm doing a bit of a PR stunt for CEM, but actually when you find that the accounting element of what you're doing is taking over from what you really enjoy, just go and invest in a bookkeeper, because you will find you get so much time back, and you will free your brain to think about the things that actually you're really good at doing. So yeah, those would be my top tips.
Those are great tips, Claire. I appreciate that. Now, to go back to something that we briefly touched upon in terms of you and your company giving back to the community, I understand that you were profiled by the Institute of Certified Bookkeepers as part of their 100 Women campaign. Could you tell us a little bit about that, and also what your advice would be to young female entrepreneurs that might be listening to the show?
Absolutely. It was a real privilege, actually, to be featured. I think I stand quite highly in the Institute of Certified Bookkeepers. I actually won Student of the Year 5 years ago. So I guess I've been quite prominent in their minds as winning an award quite early on. And the people I trained with that also nominated me for that award sort of said one of the great things was that by the time you got your award, you even had your first client, which I thought was the norm. So, and then in the autumn, just before Christmas, I actually won Small Practice of the Year with the Institute of Certified Bookkeepers. But by the nature of bookkeeping and bookkeepers, it's a highly female-dominant career. I don't entirely know why, but I think because there's plenty of flexibility. So lots of women out there who are mums and have got children and those different commitments feel that they can be quite flexible in how much work they do, and that clients quite often don't need something by a particular deadline unless there's a VAT return, and so they fit that in quite well. And although that's not my particular remit for choosing to become a bookkeeper, I think it's really important for women to be in the workplace. One of the things I've noticed amongst my friends actually is that quite often when women go off on maternity leave and they have their children and they are the most amazing mums, but they lose all confidence to get back in the workplace. And the two ladies that are actually working with me, I would say, are similar, and they've actually set up their own practice. So I subcontract some work to them. But along the way, they've just needed some mentoring and some guidance and some support and some confidence boosting to encourage them that they are doing the right thing and going about it the right way. So I don't always think of myself as a female entrepreneur, but I would just say, keep going. I think there's a whole new world out there for women, and a great opportunity to be equals. I went to a school that was mostly boys at the time, and we were definitely treated like boys, really. So, which was quite an interesting experience, but I think it led me just to keep going and not differentiate, and I also come from a line of very strong women, both my mum and my great granny was one of the first women to go to university.
Oh, wow.
My gran was one of the first female barristers in the country. So I have lots to be sort of proud about from that perspective. So my advice is just go out there and join them all and get involved and get stuck in.
That's fantastic, Claire. Claire, given the sort of variety of professional experiences you've had throughout your career, what are some of the business lessons that you've learned throughout your life?
It's all about cash flow. You can actually make a loss and still stay in business. And you can equally be looking like you're making a profit and you can go out of business. So always keep an eye on your cash flow. That would be one of my big lessons I've seen in businesses. Be kind to people. I think don't compromise on what you actually want from people and how you want them to deliver, but be kind to them, because you don't know who you're hurting along the way if you're not kind to them. And importantly as well, just to be really clear about what you want to do. And I think it's interesting working with small businesses, because I get a lot of clients that come along and say, oh, I'm going to be doing a bit more expenditure at the moment because I'm investing in some extra staff and we're moving premises and we're doing, and I think it's really exciting. I'm all for it. And I always say, you've got to speculate to accumulate. But equally, I've worked in some big businesses and watched them expand beyond their capabilities, really, or capacity. And in that process, then fail. So it's a tricky one. So I'm always excited to see small businesses expand. And I would always say, go for it. But always make the decision quickly if you need to contract. And don't ever see it as a failure. It's just something that you tried and it didn't work this time, but it might work next time.
When you look at your career journey to date, what are you most proud of?
First, I would say the teaching, actually. When you see a student come up and graduate and collect their certificate, it is really incredible. It's something I was always really passionate about. And along the way, you get to know students over a 3 or 4 year period. And you see a journey that they've come on where, they probably started and you thought, oh my goodness, how did they end up here? How on earth are they going to get through their degree? And you see them through sheer hard work get to the end and achieve something. And it's just really exciting to see that journey and to see them go out into the big world. And now one of the things I enjoy seeing is on LinkedIn. I'm in touch with a few of those students, and you see their careers and how they've become managers and general managers, HR, or some of them set up their own businesses along the way. And I think that's really exciting, and it's something that I reflect on most weeks, actually, because I have a little look on LinkedIn and I can see them doing something, and it makes me really proud of them and their journey. And I guess the next big thing is actually setting up my business, because I don't think I ever thought it would happen. I always used to joke. I used to talk to students and say, you need a plan B, always have a plan B. And it's still one of my big things now. If I get to know students through work experience, I always say, do what you're passionate about and make sure you've got a plan B, because you never know when you'll need it. And I guess I never thought I'd make plan B actually happen, and I have done. So one of the proudest moments was in the autumn winning my award, because it really was 5 years of real hard work and determination and to make it happen, and then to be recognised for that was just the icing on the cake, really, and the thing I'm equally proud of as my students.
Oh, that's fantastic, Claire. What next for you and your business? Are there any projects in the pipeline that you can tell us about?
Well, lots of people say now, what are you going to do in what's the new year hold for you? And I've spent 5 years growing. So I really keep saying, this year's about consolidation. This year's about really getting to know all my clients a little bit more in depth, providing a bit more service. That means we go out and talk to them. And then the implementation of the cash flow software that I've talked about. But knowing me, at some point, new clients will come along and I will take them on because I hate seeing them feeling a little bit stranded. And I want to make sure that they have got the information they need to help their businesses to succeed. So I'm sure I will end up taking on a few more clients. Implementing the cash flow software, and possibly taking on an employee, because at the moment my lovely ladies are all subcontractors, and I think it's time to move forward and go down that route of actually taking on an employee and committing a bit more to somebody that wants some regular work. So yeah, I think those are my challenges for 2020.
Exciting times ahead.
Definitely. Very exciting. I'm not very good at sitting still, even if I think I would quite like to.
Claire, as we start to wrap up, I'd like to ask you a few quick fire questions that our listeners are always interested in. So what do you do to relax outside of the office?
I garden. I love my garden. And so if ever I want to de-stress, I get out there to do a couple of little jobs, and before you know it, you've spent an hour out there and there's still another list of jobs to do. So that's one of the things I'm really passionate about. I love cooking for my friends as well. And I also sing in the Kingston Choral Society. And by the nature of what I do, I've ended up also becoming treasurer for my choir. But that's a real privilege to do that. So yeah, and I love singing. Thursday nights gets me out of the house and have a good hearty sing, and then we have a concert 4 times a year. So
that sounds lovely. Are there any books that you've recently read that you would recommend to our listeners?
Normally I read quite a lot of what one of my friends would call chick lit, which is pretty light stuff, but actually I've embarked on 2 quite meaty books recently. The first is the autobiography of Lady Anne Glenconner, who was a lady in waiting for Princess Margaret, and she is part of the family that own the Holcombe estate in Norfolk, which is very near to where my dad used to live and where we had a cottage. So Norfolk I always think of as my second home.
All right.
And walking on the beach up there. So that was a really fascinating read. And the other book that I'm slowly ploughing my way through in chunks, intermittent with something a bit lighter, is a book called The Lemon Tree. And it talks about the history of Israel back from the 1930s. And the reason I started reading it is because back in the autumn, I went on a pilgrimage to Israel, and it was a wonderful experience, but I came away feeling very ignorant of how Israel and Palestine have become what they are. And I wanted to learn a little bit more, and I was recommended that book. So it's quite heavy going, but it's very interesting, and I already feel I've learned loads from
that. Sounds super interesting. I'll definitely be putting that on my to-read list.
Yeah.
Are there any movies or TV shows that you've recently watched that you would recommend to our listeners?
Oh, I'm a really guilty TV watcher. EastEnders is my guilty pleasure, so don't judge me.
We all have ours.
And then in the summer, I binge watched Peaky Blinders.
Fantastic series.
Yeah, it's great. It really is good, a very good series, very well filmed as well. And then I love Strictly, and at the moment, because it's January, it's called The Midwife, and that's just a lovely feel-good programme on a Sunday night that kind of makes you all restful and ready to go to bed, all ready for a Monday morning.
That's great. Finally, where can people go to find out more about you and your business?
Well, they can go to my website, which is one of my 2020 things to amend a little bit. But they can go to my website, which is cembusiness.co.uk. And I'm a frequent visitor to the breakfasts at the Kingston Chamber of Commerce, if anyone's a member. So you'll often see me there and you can actually meet me. So those are the best ways to get hold of me. And I think also my mobile number's on the website as well. So
that's great, Claire. And for the benefit of our listeners, I'll make sure that I add those resources to the show notes. Claire, Thank you for joining us here on the Inside Kingston podcast. It's been a pleasure getting to know your story.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
That wraps up another episode of the Inside Kingston podcast. Make sure to check out our guests' website, pay them a visit, and help spread the word about what they're doing. If you have any questions or know someone who should be a guest on the show, please feel free to get in touch. I would also love it if you could go to iTunes and leave us a review and a 5-star rating. We work hard to bring on some great guests, and getting a review from you is one way to help the podcast rate well on iTunes so that others can find and enjoy the show too. Thanks for listening.